me again. So not too long ago, I did an overview of a USGI 1911A1 clone that's, new production, commercially made. Today we're looking at the same, but for an M1 carbine. This, of course, is from Auto-Ordnance, who makes this relatively exact copy. They, in fact, go so far as to claim that 95% of the parts will interchange with the real thing. I don't know exactly what the 5% is that won't, but be advised it does exist. Not every last part will interchange. But I figured I'd provide kind of an overview of one of these. I have a little bit more perspective than the 1911 video because I've had this actually for several years. It's not a new acquisition. And I do also have a USGI original one as well, so there's a little bit of room for comparison there. So I figured I'd kind of look at the pluses and minuses of the replica and discuss whether or not it's worth owning. So first, a quick disclaimer: I am not an M1 carbine expert, so if I get something factually incorrect, feel free to correct me. I probably won't get offended. But in any case, regardless of how exact they claim this copy is, there are a few things that stick out to me as a non-expert that give this away as not an authentic USGI M1 carbine. First, of course, is the cast receiver. On the original, it would have been forged. So for instance, if we look at the markings we see right here, it looks like they're kind of cast right into it. This is not how it looks on an original like we see here. Now, is a cast receiver necessarily a problem? Maybe, but not necessarily. It's kind of hard to say for sure. There are some manufacturers that do cast receivers very well. For example, the Ruger Mini 14s, from what I understand, have cast receivers. They hold up fine. On the other hand, Century had a bunch of M1 Garins at one point that had new production cast receivers that were just hot garbage. So it kind of depends. In the case of these, I've read it's kind of a mixed bag. Sometimes they can be a little warped, and that could end up being a bit of a problem in the long term. There are ways to check for that. This one is probably fine as far as I could tell. So mixed bag, possibly a problem, possibly not. By the way, the new production Inland Manufacturing, and there's also kind of an older one that made commercial carbines. I think it was called Israel Arms International. I believe that the same manufacturer forged all of their receivers, just as an aside. But in any case, the other thing that stands out to me about these that makes them seem particularly inauthentic is these kind of sharp edges that you see all over the furniture, such as, here. I'm used to kind of seeing the more rounded over edges on the originals. Maybe with, decades of carry or something like that, they will also look that way. I don't know if that's what makes the difference. But from, 20, 30 feet away, these genuinely do seem really quite convincing as replicas. As far as the actual shooting experience between the two, it actually is pretty much identical, almost indistinguishable. There's certainly not some kind of night and day difference. Cycling the action, it feels just about the same exact recoil impulse. But as far as how it feels to shoot these guns, it's virtually indistinguishable. Even the trigger pull feels almost the same. If anything, it's probably maybe slightly lighter on the new production gun. But again, no night and day difference. It really does recreate the feel of shooting an M1 carbine really very accurately, in my opinion. Now, one thing, of course, I cannot neglect to mention is reliability. Commercial M1 carbines in general don't have a very good reputation. In fact, really, it's quite terrible. As far as reliability goes, Auto-Ordnance is not excluded from that. There is a recommendation from the manufacturer that you should do some kind of a 300-round break-in period for these. And then they should work better. I have heard people report that in some cases, even that's not really enough to do the trick. But in any case, I don't know if I'm lucky or maybe this is over the last 2 years, they've made some improvements and it was the early ones that were really plagued with problems. But I've never had any particular problems with this aftermarket one or reproduction one, I guess you could say. In that, I fired commercial ammo on it to various manufacturers, surplus, including that sketchy Dominican stuff, without really any issues. So they certainly can be good, but they can also certainly be very bad. That's kind of one of the upsides of the USGI ones is they're generally not going to be lemons. It is something you're going to have to consider if you're considering one of these kind of new production M1 carbines. Of course, another factor you're going to have to consider is kind of collectability and resale value. The genuine one, it's a relic, it's a collectible. It pretty much is never going to go down in value. This is a new production gun, is not a relic or a collectible, so you buy it new and you go to resell it, now it is a used gun. The other thing, of course, is your USGI ones are just always going to be more desirable, more collectible, even if it's a mix master like this one. It's not uncommon to have M1 carbines that have been kind of refurbished and reworked, a couple times over, not have them be in perfectly original condition as they would have left the factory in, 1943 or whatever. But even a mix master like this is going to be more desirable than a new production gun. That's just another factor you're going to have to weigh. But on the other hand, one upside one could consider for the new production guns is that you can kind of treat them more harshly, use them a little harder without worrying that you're putting excessive wear on a genuine piece of US World War II history. It's, not that you shouldn't shoot and enjoy original ones, but something else to kind of consider. So that's most of the factors I would look at in deciding whether or not one of these are worth owning. But there is one left, and it's perhaps the most decisive one, ultimately in the end, and that, of course, is pricing. So if you'd asked me several years ago, like when I got this, I would have said it's worth the risk, because at that time, as I recall, I think I paid probably, 40% less for one of these than a real one would have been at the time. Yeah, kind of worth it. Today, I'm seeing these listed brand new, at least, for something like $1,100, $1,300, which places you kind of right in the neighborhood of just getting the real thing. I mean, there's not really a point in getting this anymore when it costs pretty much the same as something that's not going to be a lemon, almost for certain, and it's going to have much better resale value. So I really, this doesn't make much sense to me anymore. See, for example, if you look at those TSOS 1911s, they make sense because the difference between this and the real thing is what, like 400 or 500%? Makes it kind of worth it. There's at least two cases you could make for a replica like this. One is there's a lot of people for whom this might be in somebody's budget, but the real thing might not be. And even if you're somebody who can afford both, to have a dirt cheap beater, still kind of an appealing thing. The Auto-Ordnance M1 carbine kind of fails both of those tests. I mean, if this is in your budget, then really so is this, so that really doesn't make any sense. And you can't really treat this as a cheap beater rifle anymore if it costs more or less the same thing as the real deal. It's kind of defeats the purpose. So unfortunately, they can be decent rifles, they can be fun. Maybe if you could get one used, especially one that's maybe been vetted by someone that you trust, it could be worthwhile if you can get it for, half the going rate of a new one. But such as they are, I just don't see the purpose of such a thing anymore. I guess that's it for this one. Thank you for watching, as always.